All right. Let me tell you something about administrative agencies. What you don't know about them is what kind of horror they can bring into your life. You have a constitutional right to a trial by jury. And the way administrative agencies work is because they know that they're not constitutional, they don't deal with you in a constitutional format. They operate as a corporation. And here's what happens. So you have a problem with the EPA, or pick any administrative agency. There are literally thousands of them. Most of them, by the way, are duplicative and ride on top and do the same exact job, and for these exorbitant, outrageous sums, loaded up with a bunch of employees that don't do nothing but sit around and surf porn all day and play tiddlywinks. At your cost and expense, I might add. And figure out how else they can scram some money out of the taxpayers and get a free ride. But here's what happens. You go before an administrative law judge. And administrative agencies, they don't pass law because the Constitution says only Congress can pass law. So they don't pass laws. What they pass are, listen to the definitions here, rules and regulations. Yet those rules and those regulations parade about as law because you can be fined, you can be imprisoned, you can be sanctioned, you can have your money taken and seized from you, you can be penalized. There's all different kinds of things that go along with these administrative rules and regulations. As a result, you go before an administrative law judge, but you're not entitled to a jury. The judge hears the case, and by the way, he works for the self-same agency that you're contesting and have the controversy with. Now, what kind of a rigged kangaroo court garbage nonsense is that? So you go before an administrative law judge, and he hears the case and invariably finds on behalf of the agency. And if you don't have the financial resources to go out there and take it to, and keep appealing it up the ladder, and eventually you'd have to take it to a national level and go into a federal court. Let me tell you something. The minute you talk about a federal court, you're going to talk $5,000 to $10,000 to $25,000 to even talk to an attorney. Most people don't have that. So they beat you by financial attrition. This is the oldest game in the book. And I'm telling you, you have been subjected to it. People say to me, man, why do you get so frustrated about this stuff? Because you, as an American, don't even know that you have been subjected to the most onerous treason that could possibly be perpetrated upon you. And you're only aware of it when it comes in and bites you in your pocket, when they take your land. But I'm telling you that there are literally millions of stories of Americans who have been struck down, destroyed, their homes taken, their businesses destroyed, them left with nothing by administrative agencies and administrative law judges who declare a ruling. Look, guys, take the country back or give up and just bow down. Start licking the hands that feed. You can kiss and lick their boots if that's what you want to do. But I'm telling you right now, I'm not gonna. Get on your stick, get on your high horse, educate yourself about this EPA land grab. You can start by going to our website at americasvoicenow.org. Pull this story up. Just go out in there and do some searches if you don't want to do that. I don't care where you get the information. You do your own due diligence. Don't take my word for it. Look it up. Educate yourself. Make sure you know what you're talking about. And then get out there and raise Cain. And here's the way to do it. I posted an article up this morning that's entitled Speech. How to win an argument with a liberal. Well, you ought to know this, and I'm going to tell you why. This particular article, and I found it on a great website, it's called The College Fix. And it's their slogan is the daily dose of right-minded campus news. And it's all stuff related to colleges and universities. And we all know how slanted and biased that is, right? So this is an excellent primer for anybody who wants to engage in any kind of political discussion, especially if you're going to do so with the dark side. And you should be practicing and working at that, because your goal is not to maybe talk only to preach to the choir or talk to people who are like-minded. Your job is to educate those around you, and that includes those who are sitting on the fence and even those who are on the dark side but are slowly but surely coming awake. They're awaking from their slumber, and your job is to bring them up to speed in a hurry, right? It's a crash course on patriotism. Recognize your nation is working to deceive you to enslave you and ultimately for your demise. And I'm telling you, with what's going on right now in this administration, with the way that even liberals who voted for Obama and sycophantically supported him through all of these other scandals are now, when it's hitting them in their pocketbook and they're seeing the depth of the depravity of this Obamacare thing and how the guy is a pathological, abject liar, they're beginning to say, hey, wait a minute, maybe I was fooled here. What you got to remember, though, is that the biggest problem that human nature has is in admitting that they're wrong. No matter what, people don't want to admit they're wrong. And people who have strong political feelings especially so, and I'll tell you why. Because they've been out there talking to their circle of influence too. And the liberals are great at this. They're actually better than the conservatives are. The liberals are out there talking to their friends, and they're rallying. Well, guess what? If you were wrong, and you now recognize that by voting for Obama and supporting him, I misled all those people I talked to. And it makes it even harder to admit you're wrong. It's one thing to admit you're wrong when you're only talking to one person and you say, yeah, you know, I always kind of thought this, but you opened my eyes to something different, and I really wasn't aware of that. I guess I should have done my homework more. That's a hard thing for people to say. It's almost impossible when they have built up a reputation in their community and in their circle of influence for being the go-to guy for knowledge and information and ideas. And now he's got to backtrack and say, you know what, I led you all astray. Big difference. Anyway, this article is excellent because what happens with a lot of folks when you're engaged in a conversation with liberals, progressives, whatever you want to call them, the minute that you begin to put up roadblocks of logic, reason, well-reasoned and sound arguments, they immediately descend into emotional arguments and arguments that are, for all intents and purposes, you know, impossible to discredit because it disappears from a civil discourse and it becomes this accusatory thing. In other words, you know, well, if you don't support Obama, you're a racist. That kind of talking. Well, that's so antithetical to critical thinking. That is anathema to the critical thinking mind. And so your job is to make sure that you are not being verbally molested or that you're flat out ass whooped, okay? Your job is to make sure that you are well enough educated and secure enough in the knowledge that you have and have some tactics in your pocket on how you can help derail that kind of emotional degradation of the conversation. Because almost invariably, that is exactly what will happen. It'll come down to well, you can't tell me what to do with my body. I'm not trying to tell you what to do with your body. I'm just saying that I say the same thing to you. You can't tell me what to do with mine either. Right? I mean, you know, you can't force me to go have an abortion. You can't force me to go get sterilized. That's what, you know, it's stunning to me, the level of you know, the same thing applies to the gay marriage thing, you know. Listen, I don't care who you want to sleep with, and I don't care whether you love somebody the same sex or a different sex. I don't really care. But I don't want you to force it down my throat and make me say, yes, I agree with you, at the point of a gun. And that's essentially what's happened to us. That's what's happening all across our country. And it's not just gay marriage. It's not just environmental. It's not just welfare and all of this other nonsense that we all, in the back of our head, we all know something's desperately wrong with that. And even they know it. The problem is that they've drunk so much Kool-Aid and they've got so much invested in this, they can't back off their position. This article is pretty sharp. It's written by Julian Stanford from the University of Arizona, and it is up on the website, The College Fix. I reprinted it on America's Voice Now to make it real easy for you to find. There's a knack to winning an argument with a liberal, but the short version of all of this is play it smart. Ben Shapiro, who's the editor-at-large out of Breitbart, by the way, recently explained to dozens of conservative college students how to do just that the next time they're attacked by a professor or a peer on their campus. Now, I don't care if you go to college or not. If you're in education, and by the way, Common Core is another perfect example of this, because the intelligentsia of the country are the ones who are defending Common Core, even though they have no idea what's in it. So you can utilize these skills, and he's actually got a whole series of steps here, which we're going to go over. There's 10 steps. You can use this to derail their arguments. Shapiro addressed these students November 8th in Santa Barbara, California, to a Young America's Foundation. It's a conference that's held every year. So basically, here's what Shapiro had to say. There's hope to win these arguments. Young conservatives can combat unfair judgment with his 10-step method on how to best engage in an effective discussion with a liberal. So here's what they are. Step number 1, embrace the fight. Have courage, maintain your ground, and stand up for what you believe in. In other words, don't be afraid to say, hey, wait a second, that's not right. You're disingenuous in your argument here. Or don't say just because 3 of them are arguing against you and you just want to end the argument because you don't want to be, verbally whipped, that, you're going to back off of your position. Don't let peer pressure change your mind. Be courageous and stand up for what you believe in and be vocal about it. I use the phrase here all the time. America, arise and be counted. Be fearless, be fierce, be courageous, and speak out, even when your voice shakes. I got to tell you, I got a son in high school, and he said to me he's uncomfortable with raising issues about Common Core because he doesn't want to be essentially persecuted at the school for taking a position and a stance against what the schools think or want to institute. And his concern is, but you know what, Dad? I'm going to be applying for scholarships, and I don't want to be penalized. Hey, you know what? I mean, I understand his concern. But that ought to tell you everything that you need to know about why it's so important that we take our nation back. If you've got a high school kid who's afraid to speak out about the complete destruction of our education system because he's afraid of being ostracized and penalized for that when it comes to trying to apply for, and my son is an honor roll student in everything. He's in every advanced placement course you can find. The kid is brilliant. He goes to bed and he wakes up smarter. I don't know where he must have got his genetics from his mother, but the truth is, for that kid to be afraid is wrong. That's not the America I live in, or grew up in, I should say. Embrace the fight. Have courage. Maintain your ground and stand up for what you believe in. Step number 2, frame the opponent. Leftists frequently step out of the realm of civility and they rely on personal attacks in an attempt to discredit their opponent and leave them in a vulnerable state. Shapiro says liberals must be directed back towards a civil discourse. This is the one where they say, well, if you believe that, then you're a racist. If you don't support President Obama, you don't support him just because he's black. Now, that's when I say to people, well, stop right there. I 100% support Dr. Ben Carson. I support Thomas Sowell. They're both black. I would allow either of those gentlemen to be a president of the United States with my blessing. So don't throw the black argument out there. Let's stick to the real issues here, and let's really address what President Barack Obama has done to our nation. That's the kind of thing that we're talking about here, right? In other words, bring it back into the realm of civility and get it away from that issue of you're a racist, you're an extremist. No, I'm not. I'm just saying what people who are willing to look at the issue and be critical thinkers would look at it. In other words, I'm willing to look at all the facts. You only want to look at half. Bring it back into a civil discourse. 3, frame the debate. Establish the same parameters as your opponent. The third tenet is best exemplified during an interview that Shapiro had on Piers Morgan Live. He brought a copy of the Constitution with him, and he gave it to Piers Morgan on the air. And Piers Morgan was, all over him over gun rights, right, and Second Amendment issues. And Shapiro handed him a copy, and as he passed the document across the news desk, he said, quote, because you say you respect the Second Amendment, I brought this here for you so you can read it. It's the Constitution. By doing that, Piers Morgan was forced to discuss gun control in the parameters of a legally viable solution. And he's right. He came prepared for his argument. Frame the debate and be prepared to back it up and defend it. When somebody says, well, wait a second, these administrative agencies have every right to exist, that's when you pull a pocket constitution out and say, could you do me a favor and find me somewhere in here that says Congress has our permission to allow someone else to create law? Because the Constitution very clearly says only Congress shall pass law. It doesn't say Congress shall pass a law that allows an administrative agency to exist that can then pass law in their place and then throw some numbers out at them. Did you know that last year Congress only passed about 300 pieces of legislation, but administrative agencies passed 3,000? Actually, I think it was 8,000. The point is, and make sure you've got those numbers right. Don't take my word for stuff, folks. Go out there and do your own homework. You're an intelligent, articulate adult. I expect you to act like one. Don't just sit there and parade around with my opinions, my statements, my thinking on your shoulder. Learn for yourself. And if I'm wrong, challenge me. Step number 4, spot inconsistencies. Shapiro cited the issue of gun control again, this time discussing the renewal of the assault weapon ban. Satirizing the circular logic employed by the left, Shapiro says, if guns kill people and not people kill people, then why not take away all the guns? If your opponent utilizes logical fallacies such as this, don't be afraid to call them out on it. In other words, that's the perfect argument when you're talking about gun rights is, well, listen, if guns kill people, and it's really not people who are pulling the trigger on those guns, maybe what you're saying is we should be able to take all guns away from all people. Or in the case of the EPA. So basically what you're saying is it's okay for the EPA to have control over all water nationally, and we shouldn't worry about whether or not they're going to impact you. Didn't we just do that with President Barack Obama and health care? I mean, you bought into the health care argument that he gave that you were going to see lower premiums and better quality of care. But I don't know. You're a male, and I'm a male, and we're both sitting here paying for, and you're single, you're not married, and you're paying for maternity care. I didn't know you could have a baby. I didn't know that you needed birth control. Isn't that amazing? Bring it back into a position where they cannot argue with the logic. Spot the inconsistencies in their positioning and then reframe it in a way in which you take that power away. You take the wind out of their sails on that stuff. Step number 5, force the other side to answer the question. When you're asked a difficult question, liberals frequently ignore it and move on to another topic. Do not allow the discussion to get misdirected. Now, the perfect example of this is when you see a politician being interviewed on TV, and the person who's doing the interviewing will ask them a question, and they'll say, well, what's really important here is that Obamacare promises to give 30 million Americans health insurance. And you say, well, wait a minute, stop right there. Hold on. It was intended to give 30 million Americans health insurance. But if you end up stripping 30 million other Americans of their health insurance, isn't it the same 30 million? I mean, it may be different faces and different names, but ultimately 30 million people are not covered. Doesn't that really defeat the point? So you see, you want to be prepared to and you got to know your topic well enough. That's why you need to do your own homework and your own research so that you've got the ability to sit there and say, well, okay, but under Obamacare, they never told us that somewhere between, right now we know it's 5 million, but we haven't even begun to get into the small business and the big business markets. And we know that the estimates that are going to come down is that within 12 months, we're going to see another 50 to 100 million. Now, if 50 to 100 million people lose their coverage so that 30 million people can get their coverage, something's desperately wrong with this picture. I mean, frame the position another way. All right, so here's the deal. You make $67,000 a year, roughly. That's what you told me you make $67,000. I only make $47,000. So what I'm going to suggest is that every year you give me $10,000 so that we're on an even keel. Is that okay? Is that fair? Try to make sure that you're spotting the inconsistencies in their arguments. And then when you do find that, point it out. And then make sure that they stay on the point. Don't allow them to distract it and try to use talking points. Because you know what you're going to find? Those talking points are an exact verbatim statement from something else they heard from somebody else. And that's what I mean when I say, don't be a parrot. Have your own formulated opinion so that you, after doing your own homework and after educating yourself, you can actually take facts and figures and pull them out in any order. They don't have to be in some specific memorized order, but you ought to be able to literally sit there and pull an ace out of the middle of the deck of the cards and say, aha. That's the difference. That's why you need to know your topic. Step number 6, don't get distracted. If you allow yourself to fall victim to this tactic, you are, quote, according to Mr. Shapiro, following the rabbit down the rabbit hole. And that is the truth. Here's where that scenario gets applied. You're having a discussion. And what happens is your logic and your reason will get to the point where the person that you're having the discussion with will feel like as if they're beginning to lose the argument. It will descend into either an emotional argument or it'll descend into you're a racist or, you're a race baiter or some other ridiculous emotional issue. Or they pull out this esoteric example that is so off the mark. Well, what about people who live on a desert island? Well, come on. I mean, that's not really the argument here, is it? You'll see those kinds of examples thrown out in front of you all the time. Just know that when they're thrown out at you, exactly what they are. It's a red herring. It's meant to get you to look away. And once you're looking away, you can't see what they're talking about. Don't get distracted. Don't allow yourself to fall victim to that. Keep it on point. Number 7, if you do not know something, admit it. If that person wants to sit and have a discussion about nuclear power, and the only, you're not sure about how to spell nuclear, then don't start having a topic of discussion about it. Because what's going to happen is they may have more facts and figures and knowledge and ideas about this than you do, and then you're going to look like a knucklehead. What he says is, it is better to acknowledge that you are not an expert on a subject rather than to let your opponent walk all over you once they figure out that you're unfamiliar with it. So if somebody says to you, if the topic starts to drift into an area that you're not comfortable with, and it migrates away from an area that you are comfortable with, either bring it back or say, yeah, but our topic of discussion here was not nuclear. We were talking about Second Amendment rights, or we were talking about free speech, or we were talking about the NSA and privacy. I don't want to get off into a whole topic about nuclear energy because that we haven't really settled the first topic yet. Let's finish that one. Bring it back there. Or simply flat out say, listen, you may be able to teach me something about nuclear energy because it's really not an area that I have an enormous amount of familiarity with. But what I'd rather do is rather than get off on that tangent, and by the way, I'm happy to have that conversation with you because I might learn from you. But at the same point in time, I want to finish the topic we're on. And what we were talking about was the NSA spying. You get it? Bring it back to where you do have a level of comfort. And don't get sidetracked into chasing a rabbit down a topic you have absolutely no experience with. That's why I say to you that you should be a subject matter expert in order to be able to handle conversations like this. You don't have to be a subject matter expert about everything, and you shouldn't sit there and say, I'm not going to have these conversations until I'm a subject matter expert. You've got to practice. Just make sure that you don't wade in too deep. If the water is over the hip boots, then you're in too deep. Step number 8, do not buy into the paradigm. Liberals will try to argue against their perception of the conservative ideology, not with you as an individual. Not all conservatives believe exactly what you believe, and make sure that they know where you personally stand on an issue. So, perfect example. Don't buy into the paradigm. I'll have a conversation with somebody and they'll say, well, you want to stop everybody from having abortions. Whoa, stop right there. You're wrong. You're making an assumption about me based on a bias that you have about all conservatives. The truth of the matter is, I don't really have a problem with abortion. It's up to you. That's between you and God. That's not my place to tell you what to do with your body. The one thing I do have a problem with, even on the abortion side, those folks who don't want abortion, is, listen, if somebody is raped or they're the victim of incest, on a personal level, I believe that they should be able to have an abortion. If you're about to have a baby that is fathered by your father, If you've been raped, I believe you should be able to have an abortion. That is my personal belief. You may not agree with it, and I don't really care whether you do or not. And if you shut the show off because I don't agree with you on abortion, then you're the one who's got the small mind. The truth of the matter is that I don't condone abortion. I wouldn't have one. I wouldn't ask my family to have one. I don't think they're a good thing. But it's really not my place to tell you what to do with your body. That's between you and God. And, you know, if abortion was actually the way in which they couched it, that it was going to be rare and legal, that would be one thing. I'm okay with it if the mother's health is in danger. I'm okay with it if you've been raped by daddy. I'm okay with it if you've been raped by a stranger and you don't want to carry that child to term. And you may not like that argument, but that is the truth. And what happens is when a liberal says to me, all you conservatives want to have access to my body, I say, no, I don't. I really couldn't care less about your body. The truth of the matter is it's not my place to determine. And then when I tell them that I believe that it's okay for abortion for incest and rape, I've just deflated their sales. Step number 9. Let the other side have some meaningless victory. When a liberal engages you in a discussion, such as immigration reform, and asks if you agree with it, say yes. Then qualify that response. By doing this, you take the buzzword off the table. Liberals have carefully packaged phrases. This is the bullet points and the talking points I told you about earlier, such as immigration reform or pro-choice. These are specifically designed to make conservatives appear heartless when they disagree with that particular platform. By playing the liberal game with slogans, you take away some of their power. And I do. So here's how I would respond to that. Let's use the example of immigration. Well, you don't want any immigration at all. Well, stop right there. I do believe in immigration reform. I believe that we should have immigration reform. I recognize that based on your numbers, there's 11.5 million of them here in the country. I understand that. The truth of the matter is, those 11.5 million, they probably shouldn't be separated from their families and ripped out of their families and sent away. I'm going to agree with you on that. But what I am going to also tell you is that in order for us to move forward with that, the border has to be hermetically sealed so that a flea can't get across. When the border has been sealed, then I say, okay, once that border has been sealed, and it's proven to be sealed, not some promise that, well, immigration's down. No, I want it sealed, locked tight. Once that border is sealed, then I say, let's open up a registration window where everyone who's here in the country illegally, with the knowledge that they're not going to get tossed for coming forward, comes out of the shadows and registers. And by that registration, they're saying, I want to be a member of this society. They go to the back of the line, and they got to do whatever they got to do, start paying taxes and all the rest of that. I'm fine with that. But I don't want to have any discussion until that border is sealed. Locked down tight. After that, we can have any discussion you want. But that's a prerequisite, because we cannot allow the border open so that we have this conversation again 3 or 5 or 20 or 50 years again. Now, if you can agree with me on that first and foremost we ought to seal the border, then we can have any discussion you want about what to do with those who are here. But that's the first thing that has to happen. The border gets sealed. So you can let them have a meaningless victory. I do agree with you on immigration. I'm not against it. I'm not against immigration reform. I'm just against unlimited immigration reform. Step number 10, and then we're going to wrap this segment up. Body language matters. Nonverbal communication is just as important as the spoken word. The key to winning the discussion is never to be on the defensive. Once you begin to defend your argument, you are already losing. Shapiro's bottom line, be courageous and stick to your convictions. I'd add a few things to that. 1, your body language will matter when you're knowledgeable about your subject matter. I'm going to tell you something right now. If you are uncomfortable with the topic that you're having the discussion about, your body language is going to expose you and tell the tale. So, not just be courageous and stick to your convictions, know why you have those convictions. That's an argument I couch to you guys every single time I talk to you. Know why you believe what you believe. and understand it from not only your perspective, but the opposing side's perspective. Because then you're in a position to not only know where you stand and why you stand there, but you're also in a position to know why they stand against you and how they arrived at their positioning. This is all part of the critical thinking issue that we talk about on a routine basis. If you are truly doing critical thinking, you're going to have spent some time learning both sides of a position in an argument. I'm telling you right now, one, you may actually improve your own understanding of an issue to the point where you might even modify your own position a little bit. Instead of being a staunch person against something, you may actually say, well, I'm generally against it, but I can see that there may be times when it's applicable or it has to be allowed. Or it's really nobody's place to deal with. Right? Make sure that you're learning both sides of the coin. You wouldn't sit there and take a book and make a decision on what that book says by only reading one page of it. You can't possibly do that. You can't have a good, well-rounded understanding of what that book has to say by just reading one page of it or just the cover page. You can't figure it out by reading on the inside cover the summary. You need to fully understand it. And the only way that you're going to do that is by learning the topic. Now, that means that you generally want to find a topic that interests you. I'm running way over time here. But you've got to find a topic that interests you. Otherwise, you're going to be, it's like reading a math book. It's so dry, it'll put you to sleep. Educate yourself about those areas that you have a personal interest in, something that is an interest and an affinity to you. And then once you have that, then make sure that you've checked their side, understand why they think the way they think, understand what they think, and then you're in a position to actually have these discussions. But you know what? It's our duty, it's our obligation to make sure that we are educating those around us within our circle of influence. And your circle of influence includes people that don't agree with you. So, the next time you want to have a discussion like that, here's my suggestion. Get a hold of this primer, whether you find it on my website or back at College Fix. All credit goes to them, by the way. I had nothing to do with this. I'm just analyzing it with you. But here's my suggestion. Read this, go through this article, and read it thoroughly, and read it well. Then when you've accomplished that, make sure that you have done your homework on your particular topic. Read it, memorize it, apply it, and repeat. Be back in just a minute. You're listening to America's Voice Now. You can find us on the web at americasvoicenow.org. You can find us on facebook.com/America's Voice Now. You can find us on youtube.com/America's Voice Now. And our new Spreaker app, which, by the way, if you have a mobile phone, you can download it from either iTunes or from Google Play. Just look for the Spreaker application. Type it in. It's SP Sierra Peter Romeo Echo Alpha Kilo Echo Romeo. Spreaker, like a speaker, but with an R in there. And then do a search for America's Voice Now, Michael Evans, and you'll find this podcast, and then you can just literally go in there and hit it anytime you want. So you have a mobile application where you can download this or listen live. We'll be back in just a second.